Hello everybody, welcome back to NRW. I'm your host today, Rob Medina, and I thank you very much for joining me here today. And it's been a while since I've done a review on my own, because the last video that I did on my own for review was for the Independence Day film. It's been over a month since I've done a review on my own, and I missed you guys. But anyways, I'm reviewing a film today that's going to be coming out later this week on August 20th for the movie The Magnificent Meyersons. And if you've not heard of the film, don't worry, because today I'm going to enlighten you with this wonderful movie that I'm going to review here today. So to give a bit of a backstory about this movie, I had never heard of this film at all before watching this movie. And Patrick, who had asked me through a chat, and he had asked if I was interested in checking out this movie to potentially do a review. And in sending that message, he also had sent the link of the trailer. So I checked out the trailer, and I think maybe like the first 20 seconds of the trailer, I was really not feeling the story. But then as I continued watching it, I was starting to become a little bit more interested, a little bit more engaged, and I started to pick up on something that I didn't catch on the first 20 seconds of the trailer that I started noticing as the story had progressed in the trailer. And I said, you know what, I'll check it out. And if I like it, I will review it. Well, it turns out I did like it, but I will also point out too that in the first, I'm going to say 10 to 15 minutes of the movie, there was a lot that I was just not getting. I didn't really care a lot of what was going on because it just was a lot of rambling for me, even though that's what I do for a living. Well, technically I do that for a living. But at any rate, I was not really feeling the story. But as I continued watching the film, I really started to become more engaged with the characters, more engaged with the story and the conversations that they were having, because there was a unique perspective that I thought was very that was necessary to tell this story to keep everyone invested. At least for me, that's how it felt like for me. So I certainly will get into a little bit of the plot, but not a whole lot, because there's a lot that I'm gonna leave out for the purposes of you having discovered the things that I discovered along the way and the story with the Meyersons and their beliefs and lives and God and whatever else. I think there's a lot more that you should not know a lot of when you walk into this movie, especially with the big announcement that comes out in the film, which if I reveal it now, it may seem out of context, seem really silly, but when you watch in the movie, it almost kind of adds an interesting perspective in with what's going on in everyone's lives and how this announcement has an effect on them to some degree. And I think that's something that I don't want to take away from by revealing it to you. And it's not like a big, massive spoiler, but I think it would help if you just don't know anything about it and just watch it and see for what it is. And however you take it, that'll be up to you. But I hope that you'll stick around and watch to the very end like I did, and hopefully you'll get something out of it. And without further ado, as I already got into the plot, let's first get into the positives, and then I'll be getting into my negatives. The first positive for me are the actors in this movie. I think every single one of these actors in this film do a really good job with their performances. And the way that they're carrying the conversation in this movie, in the beginning, as I said before, the first 10-15 minutes of the film, it was really hard for me to get into that, because even though I felt like it was a very natural conversation these characters were having in the movie, it still kind of had a certain flair to it that was very cinematic for me. It's kind of hard for me to explain without... I'm not sure if I'm going to do any justice by explaining it to me. I'm sure if you watch movies, you'll understand that there's a certain way that characters talk in movies that doesn't necessarily work in real life. It kind of had a little bit of that in the beginning for me when I was watching the movie. But again, as I watched the film, the naturalism of the conversation started to come out more. I felt very organic, and I really started to get a feel for what they were going for, and as far as how they were approaching the conversation, and it felt a lot more grounded as the film had progressed. I'm not sure if I'm doing it justice by explaining it that way. I'm sure if you watch the movie, you may understand where I'm coming from, or maybe I'm just too much of a dumbass I'm not that smart to really pick up on that. It was a very natural conversation they were having from the very beginning, but it didn't feel that way for me. Kind of went off on a tangent here, but the point I'm getting is that everyone in this film does a really good job with their performances. All the actors in this movie. You have Kate Mulgrew, who I think many of you guys may recognize for her role in the character she plays, Red, for the Netflix original TV show in Orange is the New Black. And we also have Richard Kind, who plays the character of Morty Meyerson, who is actually the husband to Kate Mulgrew, who plays the character of Terry Meyerson, the mother. And then we have a slew of other actors too. We have Ian Caan, who plays one of the sons, Jackie Burns, who plays the daughter, Daniel Eric Gold, who plays one of the other sons, and we also have Shoshana Stern, who plays the daughter of Susan Meyerson, who is actually deaf in this movie, who is also deaf in real life as well too. her conversations, in my opinion, were one of the best ones in the film. And when you watch that conversation between herself and her girlfriend, it's a very, very unique conversation that they're having. Not necessarily because of they're doing it with sign languaging, but just the way that the conversation seemed very affectionate, very organic. Something about that seemed really appealing to me that in a lot of ways was a lot better than hearing everyone else talk. There's a silence about the conversation, but you can still feel that connection that they have. You feel that they kind of challenge each other, but there's no harshness behind it. It was a very wonderful and calming and comforting feeling about that conversation that I really, really loved. And I don't mean to say I wish I saw to say it by saying this this is a negative on everyone else. That's not what I'm trying to convey here, but I wish I saw a lot more of that between these two characters, because their conversation I really was connecting with the most, especially when it came to the big reveal in halfway through the film. But the overall cast, in my opinion, does a really good job with the performances and carrying the conversation. Now, the other positive for me, this was going to be rather hard for me to explain because I really didn't put a lot of thought into it, but it just popped up as I'm getting into this review. The positive for me actually has to do with how the surprise of in this film that occurs that has an effect on everybody and how this was revealed. I thought that was handled rather well. And again, if I reveal it to you out of context, it may seem rather silly. And truthfully, I think it will seem rather silly if you don't watch the movie and seeing how it's actually being brought to everyone, and then how it's revealed to the audience. And then when it's revealed to the audience, you are already invested with the characters, listening to their perspective on life, on God, on life in general, and hearing this announcement, and then hearing everyone else question themselves or are being reassured with what they've said before has validity now. It's a very unique perspective to see how everyone is reacting to the news, and I actually appreciated that. I found that to be rather interesting, and it actually helped carry the story to I wouldn't say another level, but it definitely helped carry the story and keeping things moving forward, not having a sole focus on everyone at that moment, but really getting everyone's reaction to this one topic that is something that could be rather either very frightening for a lot of people or very exciting. You just never know how people react. But in the movie, they acted rather, I would say, calmly for the most part. But there's also another aspect to the story and with the family that you are really getting a feel for how broken a lot of the relationships are with everybody, whether they still have some connection to some way or shape or form, but not everyone is really truly happy with one another. It's what I'm gathering here, at least with the families I'm talking about. But there's something about the way that is revealed on what is the catalyst of all that. It could be kind of questionable. I think for me, I understood the approach that they were going for, and I think it worked very well for me personally. I still think it would have handled a little bit better, maybe a little bit more time added to the film, a little more depth that could have helped flesh out the things a little bit better for the story and for the characters. But overall, I just thought it worked well considering what we are learning about certain individuals in this family that are going through some hardships in their own personal lives, in their relationship, and then with the announcement that the news, or rather this reveal of a certain family member of why they did what they did and what they had to do in order to protect themselves and protect their family. It's a very tough situation to be in, I would imagine, in real life, and how someone would respond to that. You get different variations of how people are reacting, at least in the family, are reacting to that, and how some are sympathetic, whereas others are not. Some may never know about it. Some you will assume will find out about it later on, and you can only assume how they're going to react upon hearing this news. So it's a very ambiguous but almost satisfying approach with what they took to the story. And I think that's really where my positive ends here, without really getting too much into other spoiler territories here. So let's get into my negatives. So the negatives for me really has to do with the fact that the movie is rather short. It's only 90 minutes long. I think this is a movie that really deserves a lot more time to develop the characters, to really develop the story, to get a much better feel for the characters. You do get a lot of that. And this is the one thing about a lot of the independent movies I've come across this past year. There's a lot of independent films that I've come across that are really short, but yet have a lot more impact with the character development, with the story, with the depth that you need time to develop to develop the story in the film. And I certainly do believe this movie did a really good job with that, but there's still something about the film that I walked away rather empty, that I wanted more, and that's a good thing. And it also is also a bad thing too, because there's a lot more that I felt like could have been fulfilled. It could have been dealt with, handled a little bit better. But I think it's just more about timing. You need more time to develop the story, to develop the characters, and maybe a lot of it has to do with the fact that it was just budget, time, availability. That not everyone was. Maybe they couldn't get everything they really wanted to be fleshed out the way that they did. But considering with what they were able to accomplish, if that is the case, I think they're very successful in that department in trying to tell the story effectively. And I think they've done a really good job with that, because I definitely started questioning a lot of things about the characters' motivations and why they're doing these things and why they believe these things. And you hear these conversations between them and how they handle that. And a lot of it feels very authentic in my mind. Granted, it still has a lot of that cinematic flair to it that you see that's common in many films, where there's a certain way the characters talk that you only see in films that don't necessarily work in real life. There's a little bit of that in as well too, but there's also a lot of grounded conversations that do feel very authentic, especially when it comes to whose character's name I forget right now, but the daughter that's deaf, who has a wonderful conversation with her girlfriend who is also deaf, and they're both conversing in sign language. That was really the most unique conversation that I had come across in this movie, because there's something about that was very comforting about each other, the way they were speaking with one another. I'm rambling on about this stuff because, there's a lot that I really did not expect to take away from this movie upon watching it, and then walking away from it really got me thinking a lot about how people react in these type of situations in their own personal life, and then also with the big news that gets announced to the world, and seeing how people react. It's not going to be told in a worldwide scale because this is an independent movie, but you still get a feel for where the story is going with this here, and I think they were very successful in doing that. I also want to highlight too, because I have to pull my phone up for this, but the director in this movie, his name is Mr. Evan Oppenheimer. I give him props because he wrote and directed this movie, as I mentioned now, and considering with what he had to work with, I'm assuming it was a very small budget, not a lot of time in New York City where it can be very busy, and pulling out with what he did, I think he did a great job. So I give a lot of props to him. So now let's get into my rating. So as I've already mentioned before, that if I didn't like the movie, I was not going to review it. Well, I like the film, and I like the film quite a lot. I didn't love the movie, but I did enjoy it. This is a film that I actually would go back and watch. I really did connect with the characters. I connected with the topics that they were getting into. And there's something unique about the film that would want me to go back and revisit and reanalyze certain things that I've come across with this movie that would make me question whether or not how I would handle myself in those type of situations, given the circumstances. But overall, my enjoyment level of this movie was very satisfying in my opinion, even though I was still wanting more of it, which is really my major negative of this movie, because I wish there was a lot more time that we could get with these characters to really flesh things out a little bit better, especially when it comes with the ending, because it still kind of had a bit of an ambiguous ending, which I appreciate, but I still wanted some sort of closure to some degree. But one way or another, I will go back and watch this movie whenever I get the opportunity, because I think this film is definitely worth a rewatch. So in my opinion, I give this film a raise the glass. And those are my thoughts on the film. And there's one thing I forgot to mention earlier, that on August 20th, the film will be released, but only if you're in New York City. So if you're in New York, I recommend you check out the movie. But if you're going to be in LA the following week on August 27th, the film will be released there. After that, I'm not sure if it's going to be released on VOD, but I hope that it will be very soon for everyone else to check out. And I urge you guys to spend money on it, whether you rent it or buy it, but please spend money, support indie film, because this movie really does deserve some attention. And a lot of other indie films out there that deserve a lot of attention that I think people need to go out there and support, look out for, and show some love, because movies like this are very hard to come across. And in order for us to really to give these films attention, we need to support indie films. So please go out of your way, support it, buy it, rent it, whatever you got to do, but spend money on it and show some love. And if you don't like the film, fine. But if you do like the movie, please spread the message out there, because this movie does deserve to be seen by everyone. And if you haven't done so already, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell while you're at it, and also make sure you share and like our videos as well too. And be sure to follow us on our social media accounts. On Instagram and on Facebook, you can follow us on New Release Wednesdays, and on Twitter at the NRW. And for me, you can follow me on Instagram, Rob_Medina0585, on Twitter, RobMedina0585, and on Facebook, simply just Rob Medina. And also be sure to check out my show on the channel called You're So Cool with Rob Medina, where I talk to a lot of people in the entertainment industry, comedians, actors, writers, producers, directors. I talk to everybody, and it's a great show. I hope you guys check it out, and make sure you also follow the show's social media accounts on Instagram, You're So Cool with Rob Medina, and on Twitter, You're So Cool WRM. And I thank you very much again for joining us here. I hope you guys had a wonderful time. I hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you guys go out of your way to watch the movie and enjoy the film. And until next time, everybody, stay safe out there, and cheers.